Steel, smoke, and shattered doctrine. France's tank history is one of the most dramatic stories in modern warfare. From the muddy trenches of World War I to the high-tech battlefields of today, French armored vehicles have swung between global leadership and painful lessons learned the hard way. To understand French tanks is to understand how innovation, tradition, and the brutal reality of war collided across a century of conflict. Let's go back to the beginning. France wasn't just an early adopter of tanks. It was a true pioneer. In 1917, the Schneider CA-1 became its first operational tank. It was designed to do one thing: break the stalemate of trench warfare. Heavily armored for its time, it looked like an iron box on tracks, but it was mechanically unreliable, slow, and a prime target for enemy artillery. Almost immediately after came the Sixth Chammond. This tank was longer, more heavily armed, and looked even more bizarre. Its long, overhanging hull was a major design flaw, making it prone to getting stuck in the shell-pocked mud of no man's land. It was a powerful gun platform, but a terrible tank for crossing trenches. France needed a better idea, and then a true revolution arrived. The Renault FT. This little light tank changed armored warfare forever. It introduced the layout that is now standard on virtually every tank in the world: engine at the rear, driver in the front, and a fully rotating turret on top. Before the FT, tank guns were often stuck in fixed positions on the sides. With a 360-degree turret, the FT could engage targets in any direction without having to turn its entire body. It was cheap to produce, surprisingly mobile, and incredibly effective in swarms. The Renault FT was a global sensation. It influenced tank designs worldwide and remained in service, in one form or another. Well into the 1930s, France had, quite literally, invented the modern tank. After World War I, France boasted the world's largest and most powerful tank force. But this strength hid a deep-seated problem. The French military struggled to agree on how to use these new machines. Instead of developing a unified doctrine, they built a zoo of different tanks, each designed for a specific, narrow role. It was a strategy of specialization that would prove disastrous. You had light tanks like the Renault R35 and the Hotchkiss H35. Their main job was to support the infantry. They had thick armor for their size, but they were slow, and their small cannons were barely adequate for fighting other tanks. They were walking shields for soldiers, not breakthrough weapons. Then there were the medium tanks, most famously the Samo S-35. On paper, this tank was a masterpiece. It was fast, well-armored, and carried a powerful gun. In a one-on-one fight, it could beat almost any German tank of its day. But it was expensive and complex, so not enough were built. Worse, the turret was designed for only one person, the commander. He had to spot targets, load the gun, aim, fire, and command the tank all at once. It was an impossible workload in the heat of battle. Finally, France developed its heavy breakthrough tanks. The magnificent and monstrous Char B1 and its upgraded version, the B1 bis. These machines were engineering marvels. They carried two guns, a big 75mm cannon in the hull for blasting bunkers, and a smaller anti-tank gun in the turret. Their armor was so thick that most German anti-tank guns couldn't even scratch them. But they were incredibly expensive, mechanically complex, and guzzled fuel. And like the Samo, they suffered from poor crew layout and a critical lack of radios. So, by 1940, France had an army of tanks that were often individually superior to their German counterparts. But they were scattered among infantry divisions, unable to communicate effectively, and deployed according to outdated World War I tactics. When Germany invaded, they didn't send their tanks in dribs and drabs. They concentrated them into powerful, fast-moving panzer divisions that sliced through the French lines. It was doctrine, not technology, that proved fatal. The French tanks, fighting bravely but alone, were outmaneuvered, surrounded, and destroyed. The fall of France in 1940 was a catastrophe that abruptly ended most domestic tank production. Under German occupation, French factories were either repurposed to build German war machines or dismantled. The pride of French industry was now serving its conqueror. However, the story didn't end there. The Free French forces led by Charles de Gaulle fought on alongside the Allies. They were equipped with American tanks, primarily the reliable M for Sherman. French tank crews fought with distinction from the deserts of North Africa to the final battles in Germany, proving their courage and skill when given the right tools and doctrine. Late in the war, as liberation seemed possible, France began to secretly design a new tank, the ARL-44. This heavy tank was a strange mix of old and new ideas, clearly inspired by the heavy German tanks that had dominated the battlefields. It used a pre-war chassis but mounted a powerful 90mm gun in a new turret. By the time it entered service after the war, it was already largely obsolete. But the ARL-44 was never about being the best tank in the world. It was a powerful symbol. It declared that France was back in the game, determined to rebuild its armored industry and its national pride. After the war, France faced a critical choice: rely on American tanks through NATO or forge its own path. As the Cold War deepened, France developed its first true main battle tank, the AMX-30. This tank represented a major shift in French thinking. At a time when the US and the Soviet Union were building ever heavier tanks with thicker armor, France went in the opposite direction. The AMX-30 prioritized speed, mobility, and firepower over heavy protection. The doctrine was that new anti-tank guided missiles had made conventional heavy armor obsolete anyway. It was better to be fast enough to avoid getting hit in the first place, and to have a gun powerful enough to kill the enemy from a distance. The AMX-30 was designed for a potential nuclear battlefield, where mobility was life. During this period, France also experimented with heavy tanks, like the ambitious AMX-50 series. These were powerful beasts, armed with massive 120mm guns and also featuring oscillating turrets and autoloaders. They were designed to go toe-to-toe with the heaviest Soviet tanks. However, they were ultimately cancelled as military doctrine shifted decisively towards the more flexible concept of the main battle tank. This brings us to the modern era and France's crown jewel, the AMX-56 Leclerc. Entering service in the 1990s, the Leclerc is one of the most sophisticated and expensive main battle tanks in the world. Named after General Philippe Leclerc, a hero of the French Liberation. This tank is a perfect blend of all the lessons France has learned over a century. It combines incredible mobility. It's often called the Formula One of tanks, with advanced modular composite armor for protection. Its brain is a fully digital battlefield management system, integrating it seamlessly with other friendly units. And at its heart is a powerful 120mm smoothbore gun, fed by an advanced autoloader that allows it to fire on the move with astonishing accuracy. Unlike the isolated tanks of 1940, the Leclerc is built for integration, communication, and combined arms warfare. It has seen service in peacekeeping missions in places like Kosovo and in combat deployments in the Middle East, proving that France remains at the very cutting edge of armored design. Of course, for every famous tank like the Renault FT or the Leclerc, there are dozens of fascinating experimental designs that never made it to mass production. There was the Charter Sea, one of the largest operational tanks ever built, a true land battleship from the 1920s that was more of a parade piece than a practical weapon. There were plans for super heavy tanks like the FCMF-1, a multi-turreted monster designed to smash through any fortification. And there were countless prototypes from companies like Batniola Statelon and AMX, each pushing the boundaries of engineering. While many of these vehicles never fired a shot in anger, their innovative ideas often contributed to the global evolution of armored warfare. The history of French tanks is a story of extremes, a saga of brilliance and contradiction. France gave the world the blueprint for the modern tank with the Renault FT. It built machines like the Renault S35 and Char B1 that were, individually, titans of their time. Yet it also suffered one of the most famous and devastating armored defeats in history. From the revolutionary little FT to the hyper-advanced Leclerc, French tanks reflect a nation's constant struggle to balance innovation, doctrine, and the brutal realities of the battlefield. In Steel and Fire, they remind us of one of warfare's most enduring truths. Technology alone never wins wars, but it profoundly shapes how they are fought and who is left standing when the smoke clears. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Let us know in the comments which nation's tank history you'd like to see next.